How is everybody doing and how are you protecting your peace? The news has been dark lately, ladies. It has been dark between the news breaking every day, coming from the Diddy trial, Cassie's testimony that she was given, the public's response to Cassie's testimony. Then we have DDG and Halle Bailey going on. On top of that, Michelle just did an interview with Nick Vile on the Vile Files. Like everything is just feeling very dark, very heavy, very anti woman. So, how are y'all protecting yourselves and taking space? Let's be vulnerable for a second. I think I had my first panic attack this morning. Like, I've never actually had one. Of course, I've always empathized with people when they've talked about them. I have anxiety, so that I'm not new to. But I think for the first time this morning, I had a panic attack, full on sweating, projectile vomiting, not being able to get a clear breath out of my nose. And it was shocking to go through. It felt like I was having a heart attack. And I just had to take a second and realize that trauma is stored in our body. And regardless of whether or not we realize that that's coming up, it can come up. So even though I was in the shower and safe in my house and I'm in a great relationship, listening to the things that Cassie's going through, I was listening to coverage of the Diddy trial. And it's like that back to back with listening to Michelle and just hearing everything in the news. I think it caused an actual physical response from my body of overt anxiety. And yeah, after that happened, I'm just like, how is my audience? How are you guys? How is everybody protecting themselves and, creating distance? Because a lot of times we can move through life. And let's be honest, a lot of the headlines are traumatic that we're reading throughout a daily basis. And a lot of people feel like they become desensitized to it when in reality, a lot of stuff is sinking in and impacting us in different ways. Whether you notice that your heart rate starts raising, which is what happened to me, I think my heart rate must have been upwards of 180. But just protect yourself, be kind to yourself. I did a recap on Michelle's interview from the Valley about her ex-husband, Jesse Lally. She went on the Vile Files. Like I said, it was very dark. I had already been speculating on the things that she confirmed about her relationship with Jesse a long time prior. So hearing her talk about the things, it was deeply upsetting, but I did a recap on that. If you'd like to watch the recap, I did do a live stream because I didn't have the energy to edit. So it's out on my YouTube channel. If you're unable to find it under my videos, you need to scroll over and go to live, and then you'll find it. I also did a brief recap of Ashley's interview. I think her name, Addison Ashley, let's just go with Ashley. Ashley from Love is Blind, season 7, DC. She did an interview with AD on AD's podcast called What's the Reality and talked about her divorce with Tyler. She is officially divorced from Tyler May 20th. I did a brief recap of that on my TikTok, so make sure you're following me on TikTok. Say hello if you're coming from Spotify or if you listen to my podcast. Tell me how you're listening. I love to listen in the comments and see how people are engaging with me. Briefly, what I'll say about the interview. No disrespect towards AD. I think she's a great interviewer. I'm happy she has this podcast. I didn't expect much accountability throughout the interview, and here's why. I think that AD is going to become somebody for the network who, because from my understanding, I'm not sure about this, but from my understanding, I think AD's podcast is in affiliation with Netflix. And so I think that she was going to be like the main interviewer, so that they can sort of control the narrative a little bit as Love is Blind seasons end and as contestants go out to various press sources to do interviews. I think AD will probably become their first stop as opposed to them going on, platforms like the Vile Files. I think that they're creating their own large platform. So I'm happy for AD with that. But with that being said, I feel like they have their hand in the pot with AD's interviews. And I feel like we wouldn't get to any crux of anything that would implicate production, really. We spent a brief amount of time discussing the fact that how did Love is Blind um, How did Tyler get past the Love is Blind vetting team who's doing the background checks, who's looking at social media? Like that was briefly talked about, but I would like to go in further about that. And do you really think he got past that? Or do you think that they knew and deceived you? Do you feel like this is intentional at this point to use Black women on reality TV to go through trauma and be entertainment? Like I would have loved to hear a conversation like that. And I'm sure it's a conversation that AD would have had normally if she wasn't, through Netflix. But it's just something that I didn't expect to hear on this podcast episode. Also, I get the sense that Ashley wasn't going to do any interview with someone where she didn't have a lot of control over the episode as well. Meaning, I don't think she was ever going to sit down with Jessie Wu, and I don't think she was ever going to sit down with Storytime with Ricky. And like, to be honest, if I'm Ashley, would I be gung ho about talking to the people who broke the story, especially if I hadn't listened? Like, that's the caveat. Ashley didn't listen. Like, I don't know. I feel like maybe I would feel defensive about that. But me outside the situation, I would love to see it. They had all of the knowledge. They broke all of the stories. I think that that would be like a very transparent conversation because they have their own timeline and they have their own things that they know to sort of ask Ashley about things. But I don't think that they want to get deep like that. I think that really it's to talk about how Ashley handled online scrutiny. That's what I think the platform was for, how she's moving on from that now, what she dealt with in her relationship with Tyler and how it felt to be so deceived, how she's working towards not bringing that into her next relationship. That's what I think that the episode was really about. Now, Ashley did say things, obviously, like she criticized Tyler. She wasn't being protective of him the entire time, but I still feel like she was protecting Tyler and her decision to stay by Tyler's side during this interview. And that's just my personal perception of things. So you'll have to let me know if you perceive it that way as well. Another thing that I took away, and I know that I'm not the best person to like offer commentary on this because I'm not a part of the LGBTQIA plus community. I'm not a part of that community, but I do want to say that there was a tone from Ashley prior and even certain people online that sort of had the opinion that there was just no way, there was impossible that Tyler could have had a romantic relationship with Bri. And that to me, I'm not sure what word to call that other than it feels as if it's revealing some sort of implicit bias. And I don't know what that is. Whether it's your belief that Tyler was one version of masculinity, so he would never be attracted to Bri. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's a view that if Tyler was attracted to Bri, and because Bri is a lesbian, that calls Tyler's question into sexuality for people who view things in a very, you're either straight or you're not, a very black and white type sense, who don't realize that sexuality is a spectrum. So I'm not sure what it's revealing, but it just felt like Ashley never believed that Tyler could have had a relationship, could have had sex with Bri. Like there could have been something there beyond him just being a donor. And that to me, the ability to believe that reveals something, like I said, going on internally for her, whether it's her view of masculinity, I'm not sure. But like the delusion to think that that's reality and that men aren't men and just, really having sex with anybody. You know what I mean? Like, I think that that impacted how long it took Ashley to accept this information. Like, and still to this day, be hesitant about whether Tyler did or did not father his twins naturally, which he clearly did, as to whether Tyler did or did not have a relationship where he was in contact with Bri, whether they had some sort of complicated romantic relationship. We heard from Bri's ex-wife. We know that there was, at the very least, like no, not at the very least. There was an abusive relationship going on there and a toxic relationship between the three of them. The abusive relationship being between Bri and her ex-wife. Now, I'm not sure if Tyler was aware of that, if Tyler was around for all of that, but Tyler was certainly a reason, according to Bri's ex-wife, as to why they would get into arguments because of Bri and Tyler's closeness. So Yeah, I just feel like Ashley was unable to digest that. And I feel like that was part of what prolonged her ability to accept things. I also think that she's not ready to just say, I was wrong. I trusted him too soon. We didn't have a history together. And I understand that. I have tons of empathy towards Ashley because here's the reality. Again, she never should have been put in this situation. Love is Blind should never have cast Tyler. He wasn't ready for marriage. He wasn't a great fit with Ashley, who communicated different goals for herself at different stages than Tyler. So, like, that's not her fault that she was put in that situation. And I understand her inclination to trust that she has been put with probable matches, like who have been vetted. However, this is reality television, and Love is Blind does not have a good track record with that. So I wish, because I hate to see what Ashley's gone through, that she had protected herself more during this experience. I'm sure everybody feels that way, but I don't think that she realizes that the comments, when viewers started to turn against her, and not even nobody rooted for bad things to happen to her. It was more so just, we tried to tell you. Now, whatever happens, okay, Ashley, I guess you have to deal with. That's the vibe that I got from people. It was because when people would criticize her standing by Tyler or try to warn her about Tyler, she would say things like, well, you're not married. Or I can tell you're not married. And that landed as if she was shaming single women. Oh, you couldn't understand what it's like to make a relationship work because you're not married, or you don't understand the position I was in because you're not married. And Ashley, I think, still sort of looks at marriage this way. And I think that that's sort of her inability to like look at the comments she was making and accept that they landed that way, because she talks about how she felt like she was part of a secret wives club. She could finally be a part of conversations with her married friends, of which she could never understand before. And to me, I don't understand that, because I have friends with children, and they tell me about their children and some of the challenges they deal with raising their children through different stages of life and with their partners. And despite the fact that I don't have children, I never feel like I'm outside of those conversations or unable to participate with them or understand their experiences. So I don't know. I just think that that's like a very unique standpoint for Ashley, that she was sort of feeling like she was like an outsider and like couldn't share conversations with her married friends, when you can absolutely still offer a perspective. And, like, let's say everybody's complaining, like you can have the perspective of, you have space to listen to them because you don't have somebody in your life who's draining you, an emotional vampire. I don't know. Not to say that every relationship is bad. Again, mine is great. So I'm hoping a lot of people's is. But I think Ashley very much views marriage that way, whereas I don't. And I don't think a lot of women do. And the other thing was just her willingness to accept Tyler's story face value with his children. As soon as he even mentioned the fact that he was just a sperm donor and that he hasn't talked to his children in a few years, I don't know, like, to me, like, this would have raised alarm bells. Maybe I'm saying that because hindsight is what it is, and I have all of this outside context, but it just feels like you don't know each other long enough or have a history enough for this thing that's coming out of nowhere and has not been disclosed prior, that's being disclosed right now, to believe that story. And then certainly after you find out that that's not the situation, I can't imagine defending the decision to try to make things work or to refer to his children as those children. And even in the interview, I'm going to be honest, it still sort of sounds like Ashley has a different take than a lot of us on what Tyler's actual responsibility is to his children. Again, a lot of the interview is talking about story time with Ricky and Jesse Wu without necessarily talking about them. It's clear that they're talking about them. It's clear Ashley has the perspective that they were out to ruin her, to take down her and Tyler, when in fact, I think Ricky's a journalist who is sharing a story. I also do believe both of them were like, Ashley, hello, if we can get this information to you with our following beforehand, run. He's lying to you. You're being fed a load of bullshit. And I want to say, people need to have a lot of smoke towards Tyler, because I men can be so manipulative and deceitful. And being truly gaslit is having like every bit of your reality denied and sort of curated by another person. And if Tyler positioned himself to Ashley as the only source of truth in her life, she had to be questioning tons of things beyond just, is the information they're sharing accurate? You know what I mean? Like she had to be questioning, does he love me? What is our relationship? Did he lie to my family? Do I know him at all? There was probably a lot that Ashley was going through, which of course I empathize with. But she thought that Jesse Wu and Storytime with Ricky were trying to take her down. I think that they were reporting on the news, sharing a story, trying to help her, stop her. Now, listen, if anybody went to Ashley's page and actually wished ill will towards her unborn children or ill will towards her, I'll always think that that's crazy. I'll always think that there's no need for that at all. I think that there was a saying that I've heard before, probably from my parents, that was like, as loudly as your wrongdoing was, is as loud as your apology needs to be. And I feel like that could have been the tone for this interview. And I get it. Ashley's been through a lot and she doesn't really owe any of us an apology. However, if you'd like to not get the scraplings that Tyler's getting with brand deals, and if you'd like to have a relationship with your followers, and if you'd like to kind of win people back, or if you do feel like you misrepresented yourself and you want to clear the air, I think that that could have been the tone. Now, let's dive into the Valley. Okay. I want to recap last night's episode. It was episode, I think, six. I think six. So, season two, episode six. If you're not watching The Valley, why aren't you watching The Valley? Well, if you're not watching because it's like too dark, I honestly understand that because of how I started this episode. But there is just so many takeaways, and I was really looking forward to recapping this episode with my friend Janae until I realized I got the date wrong. Of course I did for a recording. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask a couple of questions that when we talk next time, I'll be leaving space for her to answer, but I'm going to give you guys a quick recap by myself. Now, the episode starts with Jasmine and Brittany arguing with Nia. Everybody who's a part of this argument is definitely drunk except for Nia. Ex- but that's because Nia has to always be sober, in my opinion, because she always has to watch her husband Danny and his behavior. And she has to be the adult in situations. So there is no letting loose for Nia. There's always being the problem solver, in my opinion. But Brittany's drunk as well. She's going through a divorce. She's with her friends and she's having a moment. Okay. Now, Danny wakes up from his slumber to hear the group arguing with each other and walks in and tells Nia, "You don't need to be here." Now, this is because he thinks that Nia has nothing to do with the argument and that she's simply sitting in the room for other people's arguments as a spectator. And, she's like, no, 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 this is actually about me and you and our relationship. And he's like flabbergasted that everybody was arguing about him. On one hand, I get that. And on the other hand, like he's just so unaware. So Nia's issue is she doesn't know why she would have to tell the group preemptively, "Hey everybody, Danny's sleeping," because he's drunk. Danny got very drunk and he's going to go take a nap. And to that, I completely understand. Like that is awkward to offer up information. That's like demanding that so somebody tell you they have explosive diarrhea and that's why they've been in the bathroom for 20 minutes when like truthfully you could just say my stomach hurts. Like, do we really need to know those details, those dirty details? However, I understand where the group is coming from because of what I'll get to in a second. I also believe Nia 100% that she didn't intentionally mean to make Brittany feel bad. I absolutely do believe that. I also believe that when you're with somebody who cares so deeply about public perception, and Nia probably does too. I mean, she was in a pageant life, but Danny and her together who care so deeply about public perception and like making sure that his image is presented as one way, I do think that sometimes that can put you at odds with your friends. Now, Danny claims that he was drinking no more than anybody else, which is technically true because, mind you, Jesse started drinking before they even left and got on the party bus. He was already drunk on his way to Santa Barbara. So, yes, Danny wasn't the most drunk person in the group, but that again leaves the bar in hell, which is what this show does a lot. And the problem is, it's not just the issue is, oh, Danny's drunk. Everybody had an issue with Danny being so drunk, and everybody felt on edge watching him throw back drink after drink because he's been Dark Danny, as they call him, and he's not fun to be around once he hits a certain point of drunkenness. So, of course, everybody's on eggshells waiting for him to get to this drunken state and wondering how badly the night's going to turn left. Now, in the next scene, we see Michelle and Sheena go on a walk at Runyon Canyon and talk about how Aaron really can't deal with a crazy ex husband. And Michelle is worried that their relationship may actually be in peril because Jesse is a crazy ex husband. So she's worrying about what she can do to keep her relationship with Aaron because it makes sense to her that he really doesn't want to be the subject of Jesse's obsession for however many years, nor watch it happen to Michelle. Now, while Sheena is with Michelle, Jesse is with a guru. I don't even know what to call him, who suggests that Jesse scream into a pillow. Now, mind you, Jesse's tried ayahuasca, which is why we call him the ayahuasca demon. He's seen a guru. He's spent frivolous amounts of money. Now he's screaming into a pillow. And the advice that this person gives him is your attention is water. And basically implies that listen, you need to stop replying to Michelle that way because then people forget about the cheating and it becomes about how you've acted. Listen, you need to go back to therapy school because actually, what you just said, you're onto something. It's not about the cheating. The cheating is a symptom of Jesse's behavior. People will always see Jesse's behavior because Michelle is simply reacting to Jesse, who's at the very least, in my opinion, emotionally abusive. Now, I would like to know next week, Janae, if you're listening, what did you think of his advice that his attention is water? Now, in the next scene, Jasmine comes to see Luke in Kristen's new house, and she talks about how she was feeling triggered by Nia glossing over Danny's behavior that night because she also had just done the same thing on Halloween. I completely understand how Jasmine's feeling, and I think that she has every right to feel this way. Because here's the thing, it's a pattern. You're showing that you gloss over your husband's behavior and minimize your husband's behavior when it's actually a larger deal than it is to protect him. You want to keep things very pretty and it's just not it's just not being real. It's not being genuine. You know what I mean? And like to some extent I get it, they're on camera, they're filming, but if you're not being genuine with your friends, I don't know what you expect back. You could either expect them to not be genuine back to you, or you can expect some sort of resentment to come in. I also thought it was really important how Jasmine added that being in a queer relationship makes people take the touching not as seriously because Danny waited to touch Jasmine's fiance partner until Jasmine walked away. And in fact, he directed Jasmine to walk away, which makes it feel even creepier. Did you say go get daddy a drink? Which, by the way, inappropriate to Jasmine, so that when she leaves, you now have permission to touch her fiance. It seems very predatory, is how it seems. And it seems like Danny, number one, felt like it was okay to do that because he's not going to have to answer to another man. Second of all, I wonder if maybe perhaps he just doesn't take their relationship seriously because it's not a straight relationship, which is also problematic. But I think I love that Jasmine touches on this because it absolutely would have been a huge deal if he told Jason to go leave and then grabbed Janet's butt. Now, in the next scene, the girls get together and have dinner, and Nia opens up about not having a lot growing up to Kristen, Brittany, Michelle, and Jasmine. Now, I completely empathize with Nia's childhood story. Janae, the therapist, if you're listening, that's one of the things that I want to talk to you about. Now, after Nia shares her story and everybody is like supporting her and thanking her for sharing, Janet chimes in. And here's the thing, Janet has horrible timing. She does. She chimes in and says how she recognizes things in Danny's behavior and how Nia tries to protect his image with her ex-husband and asks if Danny has a problem with his drinking. Now, Nia gets defensive over this because she thinks it's inappropriate to assume or throw out there that Danny has a drinking problem. And she basically removes herself from the situation as things start to amp up a little because multiple people at the table are starting to get triggered from this situation, Jasmine and Brittany. Okay. Now, Kristen defends Nia and she's like, she was just bearing her soul. And Kristen's just on the wrong side of so many things this season. I'm going to be honest. That's my opinion. That's my opinion. Okay. So she's like, Nia was just bearing her soul into that. I agree. However, Jasmine's point is she's tired of Nia trying to cover things up for Danny and talk about things nicely because she always does this. Okay. She did it on Halloween and Jasmine starts to have the realization that maybe I'm not over this. And it's completely fair because how could you be? Danny had a conversation where he took accountability and said that he acted out of character. But now that we're learning more about Danny, being thrown out of bars, being called Dark Danny, it not being surprising when things take a left with him, when we see how Nia talked to him on the phone for a second because you know he was being a little fucking asshole. You know what I mean? Is it out of character for you? And then Nia, God bless her, she just makes me feel bad as a viewer because she's like, he was up until 11 p.m. and then drove home from voice acting and then drove all the way here. And it's like all of those things are valid. But do you do that for yourself? Because what was your day like, Nia? And you haven't reacted or done the same things that Danny did. Okay. Like you are a mother who is constantly on the clock. So when do you get to unwind and not have to care for things? I think Brittany's specifically, is misdirected. But I think the general feeling of wanting Danny and Nia to be honest about their relationship or for Nia to stop trying to protect Danny so much, I honestly think that's very valid. I do. I do. I do think it's valid. I think it would piss me off. Did Nia need to come back to the group and say, Danny's taking a drunken slumber? No, she didn't. However, going out of your way over the top to like portray a certain narrative while your friend is there and like taking a lot of heat on her relationship and everybody's drinking, I just don't see how that situation doesn't end the exact way that it did. Now, go listen to my recap of Michelle's episode with Jesse. I'm sorry. Yes, Michelle's episode talking about Jesse. Go find my thoughts on the interview with AD and Ashley. I gave them here on the podcast, but I gave a couple of like fact pointed recaps on my TikTok. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. I tuned into Jesse Solomon's interview with Tinks. In short, awful. He's embarrassing. He's cringe. He got too big for his britches. You give him an inch, you take a mile. He thinks he's going somewhere with his artistry career. He said that he recently watched Southern Charm. That makes sense because he thinks he's going to have a Craig-like trajectory. And singing will start out as this like funny hobby that we saw him do season 1, aka 9. And then fast forward, he'll make it big someday and people will take him seriously. I don't see any of that. I think he's delusional. He also talked about how he didn't know what love bombing was, and that once he looked it up, he was like, oh, that's not me. Like, I wasn't trying to get control. Men not knowing what certain terms are doesn't mean that they're not doing it. Same with men who refuse to acknowledge what certain terms are and try to find the opposition. It doesn't mean that that exists. Okay? It doesn't. So I find Jesse Both Jessies, laughable from both shows. Everybody have a great rest of your evening. Thank you for tuning in to Positively Uncensored. Leave me your thoughts in the comments. I will be recapping Secret Life of Mormon Wives. I promise I'll get into it. But as you can hear, I'm dealing with some difficulties with my throat, whether it's allergies or I'm fighting off a bug right now. I'm going to try to get myself healthy before I do some more. Have a great rest of your day and happy Wednesday.